The lecture hall buzzed with quiet conversations as students settled into their seats. The room was large and round with curved walls that glowed softly blue. Rows of seats faced downward toward a central platform where Professor Zethkar stood arranging his notes. Professor Zethkar was a crystalline, and his body looked like living glass. Light moved through his transparent form in patterns that showed his emotions. Right now the patterns were calm and steady, which meant he was happy to be teaching. His species had evolved from creatures that lived in crystal caves, and they were known throughout the galaxy for being gentle and wise. The students were a mix of different alien species, all young and eager to learn. This was the Galactic Xenobiology Institute on Kepler Station, one of the most important schools in known space. Students came here from hundreds of worlds to study how different species lived, thought, and behaved. In the third row sat Veltara, an insectoid from the hive worlds. She had 6 arms and compound eyes that could see in many directions at once. Her people lived in groups where everyone shared thoughts, so being alone at school was still strange for her. She took notes with 3 hands while the other 3 fidgeted nervously. Behind her sat Grex, a large furry creature whose people had evolved from plant-eating animals on a world with many predators. His species had developed the ability to change colors to match their surroundings. When Grex was nervous, his fur would shift from brown to gray to green without him meaning to do it. Right now it was a calm blue that meant he felt safe. Near the front, a small creature named Nyx sat in a special water-filled chair. Nyx looked like an octopus but was much smarter. His people had built underwater cities and were known for solving complex problems. His tentacles moved in patterns as he thought, and right now they were forming shapes that meant he was excited about the lesson. In the back corner sat Marcus Chen, the only human in the class. He was quiet and polite, always listening carefully and taking detailed notes. The other students liked him well enough, though they found humans a bit strange. Marcus came from a world called Earth, which was listed in the galactic databases as a Class 12 death world. Most students didn't know what that meant, and Marcus never talked about his home planet much. Professor Zethkar cleared his throat, and the crystal formations on his body pulsed brighter. This was how crystallines got attention. The room fell silent. Today we will discuss predator and prey relationships across civilized space, the professor began. His voice was musical like wind chimes. This is an important topic because it helps us understand how different species behave and why some act the way they do. He pressed a button, and a holographic display appeared above the platform. It showed images of various creatures from different worlds. Some looked fierce with sharp teeth and claws. Others looked gentle with big eyes and soft fur. Long ago, before space travel and civilization, every world had hunters and hunted. Professor Zethkar continued. The hunters or predators killed and ate other animals to survive. The hunted animals or prey developed ways to hide, run, or fight back. Veltara raised one of her 6 hands. Professor, my ancestors were hunters. They caught other insects in webs and ate them. Very good, Veltara, the professor said, his body glowing warmer. And now your people are artists, writers, and engineers. This shows how civilization changes us. The hologram changed to show modern versions of the same creatures. The fierce-looking ones now wore clothes and carried books. They lived in cities and worked normal jobs. You see, Professor Zethkar explained, when a species becomes civilized, they move past their old hunting instincts. They learn to grow food instead of killing for it. They use their intelligence to solve problems instead of using violence. This is why there is peace between different species in our galaxy. Grex's fur shifted to a happy yellow. So the dangerous times are over? No one hunts anymore? Exactly, the professor said. Oh, there are still a few criminal groups that cause trouble, but they are rare. Most species have evolved beyond their primitive instincts. Even those that were once the most fearsome predators now prefer philosophy and art to hunting. The hologram showed images of beings that looked like living nightmares, but they were wearing academic robes and holding musical instruments. The Void Stalkers, for example, were once the most feared hunters in their part of space. They could become invisible and phase through walls. But now most of them are poets and scholars. Most of them? Asked Nyx, his tentacles forming question marks. Professor Zethkar's light patterns flickered slightly. Well, there are always exceptions. A few individuals from various species reject civilization and return to old ways, but they are very rare and usually stay far from civilized space. In the back of the room, Marcus Chen raised his hand. The professor nodded at him. "Professor, I think you might be oversimplifying things," Marcus said in his quiet voice. "Maybe predator instincts aren't always bad. Maybe they can help protect people when needed." Several students turned to look at Marcus. Veltara's compound eyes focused on him with interest. Professor Zethkar's light patterns became more formal. "That's an interesting theory, Marcus, but history shows us differently. Violence and hunting instincts lead to war and suffering. Civilization means leaving those primitive behaviors behind. But what if something threatens civilized people?" Marcus asked. "What if someone needs to fight back?" "That's what security forces are for," the professor replied. "Trained professionals with proper equipment and procedures. Individual violence is a thing of the past." Grex nodded, his fur turning a confident orange. "My people learned long ago that it's better to hide or run than to fight. Fighting just leads to more fighting. My ancestors developed group decision-making to avoid conflict," Veltara added. "When everyone thinks together, there's no need for individual aggression." Nyx's tentacles waved in agreement. "My people solve problems with intelligence, not violence. We've never needed to hurt anyone." Marcus looked around at his classmates and nodded politely. "Those are good strategies for your species," he said. "I was just thinking out loud." Professor Zethkar's patterns became gentle again. "Your question shows good critical thinking, Marcus. But remember, humans are relatively new to galactic society. You'll learn that our ways of peace and cooperation are much better than the violent methods some young species still remember." The hologram changed to show peaceful scenes of different species working together, building cities, and creating art. Everyone seemed happy and safe. "The important lesson today," Professor Zethkar continued, "is that predator instincts are a relic of the past. Modern beings use their minds, not their primitive urges. We have moved beyond the need for individual combat or violence." Marcus made a note in his datapad but didn't argue further. He seemed to be thinking about something, but he kept his thoughts to himself. The lesson continued with more examples of how different species had evolved past their dangerous origins. Students asked questions about evolution, psychology, and social development. The atmosphere was calm and academic. None of them noticed that the security monitors in the hallway had gone dark. None of them saw the shadow moving through the corridors outside. None of them knew that someone was coming who had never accepted civilization's peaceful ways. In the back of the room, Marcus Chen continued taking notes, but something in his posture had changed. He sat a little straighter and his eyes moved occasionally to the door and windows. His classmates didn't notice, but some deep instinct had awakened in him. Something was wrong, and Marcus Chen knew it. Professor Zethkar was drawing diagrams on the holographic display when the lights flickered. The gentle blue glow of the walls dimmed, and emergency red lights began flashing along the ceiling. A low warning tone echoed through the lecture hall. "Oh," the professor said, his crystal body showing confusion with swirling yellow patterns. "There must be a power issue. Don't worry, students. These things happen on space stations." But Marcus Chen was already looking at the door. His body had gone very still and his eyes were focused and alert. Something was definitely wrong. The security panel beside the main entrance sparked and went dark. The heavy door, which should have been locked during class time, slid open with a grinding sound. The opening revealed a dark corridor beyond, and the emergency lights made everything look like blood. A figure stepped through the doorway. At first, the students couldn't see clearly what had entered their classroom. The figure wore black armor that seemed to absorb light, making it hard to focus on. But as their eyes adjusted, they began to make out details that made their blood run cold. The intruder was tall and thin, with too many joints in its arms and legs. Its face was hidden behind a mask that looked like a skull, but the mask had 4 eye holes instead of 2. The armor moved like liquid shadow, and sometimes parts of the figure seemed to fade in and out of sight. "Crixavel," Marcus whispered under his breath, recognizing the species' characteristics. The creature stepped fully into the room, and now everyone could see it clearly. Its species was known throughout the galaxy, though most people hoped never to meet one. Voidstalkers were born hunters who had never joined civilized society. They could phase partially out of normal space, making them nearly impossible to catch or kill. They were perfect assassins. "Nobody move," the Voidstalker said. Its voice came through a translator device, but even the machine couldn't hide the cold menace in its tone. "Nobody speak unless I tell you to." Professor Zethkar's crystal body flashed through several bright colors showing fear, confusion, and desperate hope. Please, there must be some mistake. This is just a classroom. We're teachers and students. We haven't done anything wrong. The Void Stalker turned its four-eyed gaze toward the professor. No mistake. You are Professor Zethkar of the Crystalline Homeworld. 3 cycles ago, you were on Omega Station conducting research. You saw something you shouldn't have seen. The professor's light patterns became frantic. I don't understand. I was studying bacterial samples. I didn't see anything important. You saw a meeting between syndicate leaders, the assassin said, moving closer with fluid steps. You didn't know what it was at the time, but you recorded everything for your research notes. Those recordings could identify people who prefer to stay hidden. Around the room, students pressed themselves back in their chairs, trying to become invisible. This was like something from a nightmare. Veltara's 6 arms were shaking, and all her compound eyes were focused on the Void Stalker. Grex's fur had turned pure white with terror, and he was trying to change color to match his chair. Nyx had pulled all his tentacles into his body and was making himself as small as possible. I'll delete the recording, Professor Zethkar said desperately. I'll destroy everything. No one has to get hurt. The Void Stalker shook its head. Too late. The recordings have already been copied and stored. The only way to make sure they never get used is to eliminate the witness. Please, the professor begged. These students have nothing to do with this. Let them go. The assassin looked around the room at the terrified young beings. They can live if they behave. Anyone who stays quiet and still will not be harmed. I am here for you alone, Professor. The Void Stalker reached behind its back and pulled out a weapon that looked like liquid darkness shaped into a gun. Energy crackled along its surface and the air around it seemed to bend. This will be quick, the assassin said to Professor Zethkar. You have 10 seconds to make peace with whatever your people believe comes after death. That was when Marcus Chen stood up. The movement was sudden and unexpected. Every eye in the room turned to look at the human as he rose from his seat in the back corner. His classmates stared at him in horror, wondering if he had lost his mind. The Void Stalker paused, its weapon still aimed at the professor. Sit down, little mammal. This doesn't concern you. Marcus didn't sit down. Instead, he took a step forward. Actually, I think it does concern me, Marcus said in a calm, conversational voice. See Professor Zethkar as my teacher. I'm learning a lot from his classes. The assassin's head tilted slightly, like a predator trying to understand strange behavior from its prey. You will learn nothing if you are dead. Sit down now and you might live through this. Marcus took another step forward. He was moving slowly and deliberately, his hands visible at his sides. But something in the way he moved made the Void Stalker hesitate. I'm curious about something, Marcus continued, still using that same calm tone. You're a Void Stalker, right? Your people are supposed to be the perfect hunters. We are the apex predators of civilized space, the assassin replied, though there was a note of confusion in its translated voice. Right, but here's what I don't understand, Marcus said, taking another step. You're hunting an old professor in a classroom full of students. That doesn't seem very challenging. The other students were watching this exchange with growing terror. What was Marcus doing? Why was he making the killer angry? I don't seek challenges, the Void Stalker said. I complete contracts. Marcus nodded like this made perfect sense. Sure, business is business. But I bet you've never hunted a human before, have you? The assassin's stance shifted slightly. Your species is new to galactic society. Weak, soft, no natural weapons or armor. That's true, Marcus agreed, still walking slowly forward. Humans are pretty weak compared to most species. We're not very fast either, and we don't have any special abilities like invisibility or phase shifting. He was now halfway across the room, and the Void Stalker was beginning to look uncertain. This wasn't how prey was supposed to behave. Stop moving, the assassin commanded, raising its weapon to point at Marcus. Marcus stopped, but he didn't sit down or back away. Can I ask you something? Do you know where humans come from? I don't care about your primitive homeworld, the Void Stalker replied. Oh, but you should, Marcus said, and for the first time, there was something different in his voice. Something that made even his classmates feel a chill. See, humans come from a Class 12 Deathworld. The Void Stalker went very still. That's impossible. Nothing intelligent evolves on Class 12 worlds. Marcus smiled, but it wasn't a friendly expression. That's what everyone thinks. But here I am. Around the room, the other students were beginning to realize that something had changed. Marcus didn't look like the quiet, polite student they knew anymore. His eyes were different now, focused and calculating. His posture was relaxed but ready, like a spring that could release at any moment. "You know what a Class 12 death world is like?" Marcus continued. "Everything there tries to kill you. The weather, the animals, the plants, even some of the rocks. And humans didn't just survive on that world. We conquered it." The Voidstalker's weapon was now aimed directly at Marcus. But the assassin seemed frozen, unsure of what to do. "The interesting thing about humans," Marcus said, "is that we became apex predators not because we were the strongest or fastest. We became apex predators because we never ever give up." Professor Zethkar's crystal body was flashing with patterns that showed amazement and confusion. His quiet human student was facing down the galaxy's most feared assassin, and somehow the assassin was the one who looked worried. Marcus continued walking forward with slow, steady steps. The Voidstalker kept its weapon aimed at him, but something was clearly wrong with the situation from the assassin's perspective. Prey didn't behave this way. Prey ran, hid, or froze in terror. They didn't walk calmly towards certain death while talking about evolution. "You want to know what's really interesting about human evolution?" Marcus asked, as if they were having a normal classroom discussion. "Most species develop one successful survival strategy and stick with it. Crystallines became peaceful and wise. Feltera's people developed group thinking. Grex's people learned to hide and run. The students he mentioned watched in fascination and horror as their human classmate continued his impossible confrontation. But humans," Marcus continued, "humans had to develop every survival strategy at once. We had to be smart enough to make tools, strong enough to fight when cornered, fast enough to chase down prey, and tough enough to keep going when everything went wrong." The Voidstalker's translator crackled. "You're trying to distract me. It won't work." "I'm not trying to distract you," Marcus replied. "I'm trying to educate you. See, you made an assumption about me based on how I look. Small, weak, no natural weapons. But you forgot to ask the important question." "What question?" the assassin demanded, though it seemed to ask against its better judgment. Marcus's smile grew wider, and now it looked genuinely frightening. "What kind of environment produces a species that looks this harmless but survives on a Class 12 death world?" He took another step forward, and this time the Voidstalker actually took a step back. The perfect predator was retreating from unarmed prey, and everyone in the room could see it. "Let me tell you about Earth," Marcus said, his voice taking on an almost hypnotic quality. "On Earth, we have creatures that can kill you with a single bite. Spiders smaller than your thumb whose venom will make you die screaming. Fish that can strip flesh from bone in seconds. Plants that can poison you just by touching them." The Voidstalker's weapon was shaking slightly now. "You're lying. Nothing that dangerous could produce a civilized species." "Oh, but that's just the beginning," Marcus continued. "We have weather that can freeze you solid in minutes or cook you alive in the desert sun. We have storms with winds that can level entire forests. We have waves of water taller than buildings that can destroy whole cities." Professor Zethkar was listening with growing amazement. He had never heard Marcus talk about his homeworld before, and the things he was describing sounded impossible. "And in that environment," Marcus went on, "humans didn't just survive. We thrived. We spread across the entire planet. We hunted every large predator to extinction. We learned to control fire, to make weapons, to work together in groups that could bring down animals 50 times our size." The assassin was definitely backing away now, moving toward the wall. "This is meaningless. You have no weapons. You're just one small creature." Marcus laughed, and the sound made everyone in the room shiver. "You still don't understand. I don't need weapons. I am the weapon." He began describing human hunting techniques in calm, educational tones, as if he were giving a lecture of his own. He talked about persistence hunting, where humans would chase prey for days across vast distances until the animal collapsed from exhaustion. He explained how humans developed language and teamwork to coordinate attacks on much larger and more dangerous creatures. "My ancestors," Marcus said, "would walk for 20 miles through snow and ice to hunt mammoths. Animals the size of your ship's shuttlecraft, with tusks that could impale 3 men at once, and we would kill them with pointed sticks and rocks." The Voidstalker had reached the wall and could retreat no further. Its weapon was still pointed at Marcus, but its whole body language showed confusion and something that might have been fear. Marcus continued his approach. never breaking eye contact with the four-eyed mask. But here's the really interesting part. When we ran out of large animals to hunt, we didn't stop being predators. We started hunting each other. Around the room, the other students were beginning to understand that they had never really known their human classmate at all. The quiet, polite boy who took careful notes and asked thoughtful questions was something else entirely underneath. Humans spent thousands of years perfecting the art of warfare, Marcus explained. We developed strategies and tactics that could defeat any enemy. We learned to fight in groups, to use psychology as well as physical force, to never give up even when facing impossible odds. The Void Stalker's translator was making static noises. You're trying to frighten me with stories. Stories? Marcus's expression became genuinely puzzled. Oh no, I'm not telling stories. I'm giving you data. See, I didn't just come to this school to study xenobiology. I came to study how different species think and react under pressure. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Before I became a student, Marcus continued in that same conversational tone, I was a military psychological operations specialist. My job was to get inside enemy minds and figure out how to break them. Professor Zethkar's crystal body flashed bright white with shock. Veltara's compound eyes were all focused on Marcus with new understanding. Grex had turned completely transparent, trying to become invisible. Nyx had pulled so far into himself that he looked like a small rock. You want to know what I've been doing while you've been threatening my professor? Marcus asked. I've been analyzing you. Your body language, your movement patterns, your speech patterns, your tactical responses. The Void Stalker raised its weapon higher, but its hand was definitely shaking now. For example, Marcus said, you keep backing toward the wall because that's your species' instinct when facing an unknown threat. Void Stalkers prefer to have solid barriers behind them, so they can control the direction of attack. But you've just cornered yourself. The assassin looked around quickly and realized this was true. It had backed itself into a position with no easy escape routes. Also, Marcus continued, you're breathing differently now. Your species breathes slowly when confident, but your rhythm has increased by about 30% in the last 2 minutes. You're experiencing stress. The Void Stalker's mask was pointing directly at Marcus, but the human continued his slow approach without any sign of fear. Most importantly, Marcus said, you haven't fired your weapon yet, even though I'm clearly a threat to your mission. Do you know why? The assassin didn't answer, but everyone could see that Marcus was right. The weapon was aimed and ready, but no shot had been fired. You haven't shot me because you're no longer sure you can kill me quickly enough, Marcus explained. Your instincts are telling you that I'm not normal prey. You're starting to wonder if I might be something that could hunt you back. The Void Stalker's weapon was now shaking visibly. I am the perfect predator. I have never failed a contract. Perfect predators don't exist, Marcus replied. There's always something higher up the food chain. And on Earth, that something was us. He was now close enough that the Void Stalker could have reached out and touched him. But instead of attacking, the assassin pressed itself back against the wall as if trying to disappear into it. Marcus stopped just outside the range of the Void Stalker's arms and smiled that terrible smile again. The thing is, I don't think you're a predator at all. I think you're just a very specialized tool that someone created for killing specific targets under controlled conditions. The words hit like physical blows. Around the room, everyone could see the effect on the assassin. But you've never faced a real predator before, Marcus concluded, and now you don't know what to do. The Void Stalker's weapon finally discharged, sending a bolt of crackling energy past Marcus's head. The blast hit the wall behind him, leaving a smoking hole in the metal. But Marcus didn't even flinch. He stood perfectly still, watching the assassin with those cold, calculating eyes. Warning shot, Marcus observed calmly. Interesting choice. That tells me you're still trying to regain control of the situation through intimidation rather than actual violence. The other students pressed themselves deeper into their seats, terrified by the energy blast, but even more frightened by Marcus's complete lack of reaction to nearly being killed. Stay back, the Void Stalker commanded, but its voice had lost the confident menace from earlier. Now it sounded uncertain, almost desperate. Marcus tilted his head slightly like a scientist observing an interesting specimen. You know what I think happened? I think your species was engineered, not evolved. Someone took a base creature and modified it to be the perfect assassin for specific conditions. But whoever made you forgot something important. I am not engineered, the assassin protested. The Voidstalkers are an ancient race. Ancient maybe, but not natural, Marcus replied. Natural predators adapt to changing conditions. They improvise when their usual tactics don't work. But you're stuck repeating the same programmed responses even when they're clearly not working. The Voidstalker fired again, this time aiming to wound. The energy bolt caught Marcus in the shoulder, spinning him slightly and burning through his clothes. Blood began to flow down his arm, but Marcus just looked at the wound with mild interest, then back at his attacker. That should have dropped me, Marcus said, pressing his other hand against the bleeding wound. A flesh injury like that would disable most species. But humans have a very high pain tolerance. We had to develop one to survive on our world. Professor Zethkar was making high-pitched crystal chime sounds that indicated extreme distress. His student was bleeding and facing a deadly assassin. But somehow Marcus was the one in control of the conversation. You want to know about human pain tolerance? Marcus continued, his voice steady despite the injury. Human women regularly survive an experience that would kill most male aliens. Human children play games that would be considered torture by civilized standards. Human athletes deliberately damage their own bodies for recreation. The Voidstalker was shaking now, its weapon wavering as it pointed at Marcus. But here's the really interesting part, Marcus went on. Pain doesn't stop humans. It makes us angry. And angry humans are much more dangerous than calm ones. Marcus took another step forward, and the assassin actually whimpered. The sound came through the translator as a distorted electronic noise, but everyone in the room recognized it as a sound of fear. I'm going to tell you what's going to happen, Marcus said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. You're going to put down that weapon and surrender to station security. You're going to do this because you finally realize something important. What? The Voidstalker asked, its voice barely audible. You're not the predator here, Marcus replied. You never were. You're just another prey animal that got too confident. Marcus began describing human military history in the same calm, educational tone he had used throughout the confrontation. He talked about human tactics that seemed insane to other species, charging into enemy fire, fighting hopeless battles to the last person, using their own bodies as weapons when nothing else was available. Humans invented the concept of acceptable losses, Marcus explained. That means we'll willingly sacrifice some of our own people to achieve a goal. Most species can't understand this because their survival instincts are too strong. But humans can override their survival instincts with pure willpower. The Voidstalker was pressed completely against the wall now, its weapon pointing at the floor. We also invented psychological warfare, Marcus continued, the art of defeating enemies without fighting them. We learned to use fear, confusion, and doubt as weapons more effective than any gun or blade. He gestured around the room with his uninjured arm. For example, everyone here thinks I'm facing you in combat, but I'm not fighting you at all. I'm just talking to you. And somehow just by talking I've reduced a supposedly perfect assassin to a trembling mess. The truth of this was undeniable. The Voidstalker, one of the most feared beings in the galaxy, was cowering against the wall while an injured human student lectured it about evolution and psychology. You made one critical error, Marcus said, moving even closer. You assumed that because humans look weak, we are weak. But humans are the only species that became apex predators twice. Twice? The assassin whispered. First, we conquered our own world, Marcus explained. Every other predator, every environmental hazard, every natural disaster. We dominated them all. But then when we had nothing left to hunt on Earth, we started hunting each other. His smile was now genuinely terrifying. Humans spent thousands of years developing ways to kill other humans. We became so good at it that we nearly destroyed ourselves several times. We had to learn cooperation and civilization not because we were naturally peaceful, but because we were too dangerous to let loose. The Voidstalker's weapon clattered to the floor. Its hands were shaking too badly to hold it steady. Every human you meet in civilized space, Marcus continued, is a descendant of the most successful predators in the history of their world. We're not here because we're harmless. We're here because we chose to be harmless. But that choice can be revoked at any time. Marcus was now close enough to reach out and touch the assassin, but he made no aggressive moves. He didn't need to. The psychological victory was complete. The really funny thing, Marcus said, is that you could probably still kill me. You're faster, stronger, and you have better weapons. But you won't, because I've convinced you that I'm more dangerous than you are. The Voidstalker slid down the wall until it was sitting on the floor, its 4 eyes staring at Marcus in terror. That's the difference between a real predator and a manufactured one, Marcus concluded. Real predators understand that the most important battle is the one fought in the mind, and humans have been winning that battle for 50,000 years. Around the room, the other students stared at their human classmate with mixtures of awe, fear, and complete confusion. The quiet, polite boy they had known was gone, replaced by something that seemed ancient and dangerous despite its young appearance. Professor Zethkar's crystal body was cycling through colors so quickly it was hard to follow. He was trying to process the idea that one of his gentlest students had just psychologically defeated the galaxy's most feared assassin without throwing a single punch. Marcus looked down at the trembling Voidstalker and shook his head sadly. You know what the worst part is? I'm actually one of the nice humans. I chose to become a student and a scholar. I'm trying to learn about other species so we can all get along better. He gestured toward the cowering assassin. But if you want to meet the humans who didn't choose the peaceful path, just keep threatening civilized people. Eventually, my people will decide that you're too dangerous to leave alone. The Voidstalker made a keening sound that needed no translation. It was the sound of something that had finally understood how far out of its depth it really was. The emergency lights continued flashing as Marcus reached into his backpack with his good arm. The Voidstalker flinched, expecting a weapon, but Marcus pulled out a simple first aid kit. He began treating his shoulder wound with calm efficiency, as if stopping his own bleeding was just another routine task. You're wondering how I knew you were coming, Marcus said to the trembling assassin. It wasn't magic or special powers. I just paid attention to details that my classmates missed. He wrapped a bandage around his shoulder while continuing to talk. The security systems went down exactly 3 minutes before you entered. That's the standard time delay used by syndicate hackers to disable automated responses. I learned about it in my previous job. Professor Zethkar found his voice, though his crystal body was still flashing with confusion. Marcus, what was your previous job exactly? Marcus looked up from his bandage with a slight smile. I was a psychological operations specialist with the Human Colonial Defense Force. My unit specialized in dealing with hostile non-human contacts. Around the room, the other students were beginning to understand that they had never really known their quiet classmate at all. But why are you here? Veltara asked, her 6 arms still shaking. Why would someone like you become a student? Because understanding how different species think is exactly what I need to learn, Marcus replied, securing the bandage. My old job was about defeating enemies. My new goal is to prevent the need for enemies in the first place. He looked down at the Voidstalker, which was still pressed against the wall in terror. For example, this situation could have ended very differently. In my military days, I would have just killed the threat quickly and efficiently, but now I'm trying to find better solutions. The assassin made a weak sound through its translator. You could have killed me? Marcus's expression became genuinely puzzled. Of course. I've been positioning myself to do exactly that since the moment you walked in. Did you think I was just randomly walking around the room? He pointed to his path across the classroom. Every step I took was calculated to force you into a worse tactical position. I cut off your escape routes, got you to back into a corner, and positioned myself so that your weapon would be hard to aim effectively at close range. The Voidstalker looked around and realized this was true. Without noticing it, it had been maneuvered into the worst possible position in the room. Plus, Marcus continued, I identified 17 different ways to kill you using items available in this classroom. The desk supports can be broken off to make spears. The holographic projector contains focusing crystals that can cut through armor. Even the chairs have metal parts that could be weaponized. Professor Zethkar's light patterns showed complete shock. You were planning to fight with classroom furniture? Humans are very good at improvising weapons, Marcus explained matter-of-factly. On Earth, anything can become dangerous if you understand physics and anatomy well enough. He sat down casually in the nearest chair, keeping his eyes on the Voidstalker. But like I said, I'm trying to learn better methods. Psychological warfare is much more efficient than physical violence. The sound of heavy boots in the corridor announced the arrival of station security. The door burst open and 6 armored guards rushed in with weapons drawn. They stopped in confusion when they saw a human student calmly sitting in a chair, while a notorious assassin cowered on the floor. Situation is contained, Marcus called out to them. The suspect has surrendered and is no longer a threat. The security chief, a large reptilian being, looked around the room in bewilderment. What happened here? Our sensors detected weapons fire and psychological warfare countermeasures. Psychological warfare countermeasures? Marcus asked with interest. Your equipment can detect that? Advanced military-grade psychological manipulation techniques trigger our warning systems, the chief explained. But we've never seen readings this intense from a civilian situation. Marcus looked embarrassed. Sorry about that. Old habits. I may have gotten a bit carried away with the demonstration. 2 guards moved to secure the Void Stalker, who offered no resistance at all. As they helped the assassin to its feet, it kept staring at Marcus with all 4 eyes. I don't understand, the Void Stalker said weakly. You're just a student. You're supposed to be harmless. Marcus's expression became gentle, almost sad. That's the thing about humans. We're only harmless by choice, and we make that choice every single day with every interaction we have. He gestured around the room at his classmates, who were slowly emerging from their terror-induced paralysis. Every human you meet in civilized space has decided to use their abilities for creation instead of destruction. We study, we build, we explore, we make art. But we never forget what we're capable of when peaceful options are exhausted. The security guards finished restraining the assassin and began to escort it from the room. As they reached the door, the Void Stalker turned back one last time. What would have happened if you had used violence? It asked. Marcus considered the question seriously. You would have died probably within 30 seconds. But I would have had to live with that choice for the rest of my life, and my classmates would have seen something they could never forget. He looked around at Veltara, Grex, Nix, and the others. I came here to learn how to prevent that kind of outcome. How to solve problems without destroying things. How to be the kind of human that other species can trust and work with. The Void Stalker was quiet for a long moment. Then it said something that surprised everyone. I want to learn too. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Learn what? How to choose to be harmless, the assassin replied. My species was made to kill. But maybe we can learn to be something else. The security chief started to object, but Marcus held up his hand. That's an interesting idea. But first you'll have to serve whatever sentence you get for attempted murder. After that, if you're serious about changing, there are programs that can help. As the guards led the former assassin away, Marcus turned back to his stunned classmates. The emergency lights had stopped flashing and the room's normal gentle blue glow was returning. Well, he said, settling back into his chair and pulling out his notebook. That was educational. Professor, could we continue the lesson? I think we were discussing how civilized species handle predator instincts. Professor Zethkar's crystal body cycled through several colors before settling on a warm gold that indicated deep thought. Actually, Marcus, I think you may have demonstrated that my theories were incomplete. How so? Marcus asked, genuinely curious. I said that predator instincts were primitive and had no place in civilized society, the professor explained. But you used those same instincts to protect rather than harm. You turned hunting skills into defensive capabilities. Marcus nodded slowly. That's exactly what I'm trying to understand. How do we keep the useful parts of our nature while discarding the harmful parts? How do we stay strong enough to protect people without becoming the kind of threat they need protection from? Veltara raised one of her hands tentatively. Marcus, are all humans like you? Marcus laughed, and this time it was a warm, friendly sound. Oh no, I'm actually pretty average for my species. There are humans much more dangerous than me and humans much more peaceful. Most of us fall somewhere in between. That's what frightens me, Grex admitted, his fur still pale with lingering shock. Marcus's expression became serious. It should frighten you a little. Fear keeps you careful, but it shouldn't terrify you, because fear also keeps us careful. We know how dangerous we can be, so we work very hard to be better than that. He looked around at all his classmates. That's why I'm here. That's why thousands of humans have joined galactic civilization. We want to learn from species like yours. We want to understand how to build peace instead of just winning wars. Professor Zethkar's patterns shifted to gentle blue mixed with silver, indicating respect and new understanding. Perhaps our next lesson should be about how different species can contribute their unique strengths to galactic civilization. I'd like that, Marcus said, opening his notebook to a fresh page. I have a lot to learn about cooperation and peaceful problem-solving. My people are still pretty new at it. As the class settled back into their normal routine, the other students kept glancing at Marcus with mixtures of curiosity and wariness. They were beginning to understand that their human classmate represented something unprecedented in galactic history. An apex predator species that was actively trying to become something gentler. The lesson resumed, but now it had a different focus. Instead of just discussing how species evolved past their primitive natures, they talked about how those same natures could be channeled into positive purposes. They discussed the balance between strength and restraint, between capability and responsibility, and in the back of the room Marcus Chen took careful notes, learning how to be the kind of human the galaxy could trust with its future. Outside in the corridor, station security was processing the most unusual arrest in their records. A feared assassin who had surrendered without a fight and was requesting enrollment in rehabilitation programs. The galaxy was about to learn that humans brought more than just strength to civilized space. They brought the wisdom that comes from choosing to be better than what nature made you.